Okay, let's finish up. Back to figure 329, Akhenaten, the colossal statue. Is you can see that we do have our Egyptian canons present, but again, a focus on kind of more naturalistic features as well. We have the simplicity of form. We still have the frontal and the profile. We have the archaic smile. We have the use of the symmetry. We have the hieroglyphics. A couple things we don't see is we don't see the leg forward. They're on their knees more during this time and less about the leg moving forward, except in the last figure when we're looking at the fouling scene of Nibamman. But in this case, you can see that he again is placed on his knees, and the sculpture is made out of sandstone, so there's less of an emphasis on these really high-end precious stones in geology. But looking at him, you can see that his lower attire is very loose. It's very organic, and even has a little protruded belly that's hanging out above the lower garment. So again, a focus on more of this naturalistic look, and less on the ideal form. And one thing that a lot of art historians and Egyptologists have talked about in regards to is the sculpture of Akhenaten is he has very effeminate features. So his face and different parts of his lower body or his torso are effeminate in nature, which is very interesting because there's this focus on the unification of both the male and the female energies and emotions involved in these sculptures. And a lot of that is going to transfer over into the Greek art that's going to be present later on whenever we discuss that in chapters 4 and 5. All right, so most of the Egyptian canons are present here, but there's also the additional organic and naturalistic looks that are starting to be infused in with the Egyptian canons that were born out of the Middle Kingdom period. And the other figure that I want you to know is 330, and that is of Nefertiti. And with the sculpture of Nefertiti, that first name, that Tutmose, the Tutmose, that's the artist's name who sculpted this bust of Nefertiti. And this bust of Nefertiti was found in the artist's studio of Tutmose. So this was actually found. It's unfinished. It never was completed. You can see that with her left eye. That is not fully painted. But you can still see that there's that archaic smile present. There's the symmetry. There's the frontal. There's the profile. There's the element of all these Egyptian hieroglyphics that are present in her headdress. But her neck is super elongated. And that again is a feature that was actually naturalistically reflected in Nefertiti herself. So again, these naturalistic undertones and these organic interests are starting to play out in combination with the Egyptian canons during this late this New Kingdom period. And we can see that in figure 331, there's even more naturalistic features with the portrait of Ta. And this is a mother. This is mother of Akhenaten. And you can see that the presence of she is very organic and very naturalistic, and there's not really that much of a focus on the Egyptian canons at all at this point. There's more of a focus on the symbolism. So she has a series of horns, almost like a totem shape, right above her head, and also a disc which indicates Ra, or the sun god, and then the feathers that are above that sun disc. So it's very much about symbolism and emotion, and that's really what's starting to come out during this reign of Akhenaten. So he's really bringing out these more naturalistic and organic features, and he's portraying it or having it portrayed in the portrait of his mother Ta, as well as Nefertiti and himself. So figures 329, 330, and 331. But also we can see those Egyptian canons are still considered in figure 332. with the Akhenaten and Nefertiti with their three daughters. And you can see that there is the hierarchical scale. He's on the left and Nefertiti is on the right. And you can see that there is the hierarchical scale between his size and Nefertiti's size, and of course the children. There is a focus on the profile and a little bit of the frontal. There's obviously the hieroglyphics involved, but there's not an interest in the leg moving forward. There's not an interest in simplistic form. The shapes are very organic and very individualized. It's less about the ideal. You can even see on Akhenaten on the left, his little protruded belly is present. So there's a lot of organic curves. You can see that his undergarment, both of them are curved. They're not rigid. They don't just suddenly stop and angle back in like we would see in the Old Kingdom Egypt. So they're really taking on these very naturalistic and realistic features. And you can see also that this relief is that sunken relief. You can really see it here with the contour of the pillow in which he's sitting upon and the one that she's sitting upon. His upper shoulder and the back of his neck has a really dark shadow line. That's because of that sunken carved relief. So just remember that figure 332 is another example of that sunken relief. You can see the disc in the top, which is a representative of Ra in the form of the sun disk, is that sunken relief as well. That's why that shadow is so heavy on the top of that disc. All right. Now there is one last thing that I want to talk about, and that's when Egypt finally comes to an end. That means that the Egyptian pharaohs are no longer present, and they are taken over by the Assyrians. So Egypt becomes property of the Assyrians, which were in the Mesopotamian area. So they came over, they ended up conquering in Egypt and winning out their rule over Egypt. And the piece that I want you to look at in particular is figure 337. And when you see figure 337, you might first think that this is an Egyptian king or pharaoh, but it's not. It's actually the Assyrian king, Mentuhotep. And you can see that the Egyptian canons are present. Now the reason why I really want you to know this is that though this is the Assyrian king, look what they're doing. They are taking and absorbing the Egyptian canons and bringing them back over into the Mesopotamian area, right? So it looks like an Egyptian pharaoh, but it's actually an Assyrian king with the Egyptian canons placed upon the sculpture. And this is really important because what happened in Egypt with these canons are not only going to transfer over into the ancient Mesopotamian or the more newer Mesopotamian areas, but it's also going to transfer up in Greece as well. And we're going to see that with the Koros sculptures and everything that's going to be developed in the geometric as well as the archaic periods of Greece, which is what we're going to talk about next. So we'll come back to figure 337 and see it as a transitional or a pivotal piece that moves these Egyptian canons out of Egypt, starts making their way over into Mesopotamia, and especially up through the Aegean Sea, up into the islands in the Aegean Sea, and all the way up to the Greek peninsula. So that's figure 337, portrait statue of Mentuhotep. All right. So that's what I have for you. I hope you enjoyed these 3 videos. Sorry they were a little divided and a little kind of broken up. But go and refer to these 3 videos in regards to the rest of chapter 3, and we'll start moving on into chapter 4 and 5, Greek art.